Have you ever witnessed a moment when a person is deprived of what they deserve just because they are not like the rest? A small moment, but enough to make their whole world inside collapse in silence. That's what happened to a black CEO when his fully paid-for first-class seat was taken away and given to a white passenger simply because he always sat there. No fuss, no fighting, just a cold smile and a look that told him he didn't belong here. But think about it. What if that moment happened to you? Would you just walk away in silence? Or would you stand up for what is right, even when everyone turns their back on you? And more importantly, will you choose to stay calm or let the pain tear your heart apart? Join me as we enter this story, where one man was brought down, but rose up in a way that made an entire corporation tremble. If you believe that dignity should not be trampled under any circumstances, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel to start this emotional journey together. The cabin lights glowed a soft honey gold, the kind of warm light that makes a late evening flight feel almost like a living room suspended 30,000 feet above the world. Passengers settled into wide leather seats. Ice clinked quietly in glasses. A woman flipped through a paperback. Somewhere near the galley, a flight attendant whispered a joke to a colleague, both laughing softly to avoid drawing attention. Everything looked peaceful, predictable, almost dull, and then the stillness cracked. A voice rose, calm but heavy enough to slice through the aisle like a blade. All of you are dismissed from duty, effective right now. The words floated in the air for a heartbeat before the entire cabin froze. It was as if someone had pressed pause on the world itself. A man stood in the aisle, tall, black, broad-shouldered, wearing a dark navy blazer that still held the faint wrinkles of a long day. His stance was steady, but his eyes carried something colder than anger, something heavier. Shock rippled through the first-class cabin. A businessman in 2A raised his brows so high they nearly touched his hairline. A couple across the aisle lowered their wine glasses in perfect unison. A flight attendant near the curtain, mid-stride, holding a tray, stopped so abruptly the silverware rattled. Everyone stared. Everyone wondered the same thing. Who was this man, and what on earth had just happened? But the man did not raise his voice. He did not repeat himself. He simply stood there, breathing slowly, as if reclaiming oxygen he'd been denied for years. Only one person in the cabin seemed to recognize the gravity of that tone, the purser, Veronica Hayes, her face blanched, lips parting slightly, as though she had just watched a door swing open to something she had feared but never believed would arrive. A few seconds passed, long enough to make every shoulder stiffen. And then the story shifted. The lights seemed to dim, not literally, but in the way memories sometimes overlay the present. The cabin's hum softened, fading into the background until all that remained was the man's steady breath and the quiet drum of his pulse. A narrator's whisper, like a soft gust moving past an open window. Just 18 minutes earlier, they thought he was just another black man making a fuss. The passengers had no idea. The crew had no idea. Even the airline American Skylines, proud of its polished reputation, had no idea who they had humiliated that evening. Because the man standing in the aisle was Dr. Malcolm Reeves, the CEO of SkyShield Technologies, one of the fastest-growing aviation security companies in the United States. A man known for his measured thought, his quiet authority, and his almost old-fashioned sense of dignity. A man whose life had never been about flashiness or ego, but about endurance and patience, and the kind of strength that doesn't need to raise its voice to be heard. But none of them knew that. Not when he boarded the plane. Not when they asked him to step aside. Not when they misjudged the look in his eyes. And absolutely not when they decided that his seat, the one printed clearly on his boarding pass, didn't belong to him after all. The story rewinds again. Passengers now appear in motion, time flowing backward as if the cabin were a reel spinning in reverse. The woman's book closes. The businessman uncrosses his legs. The flight attendant's tray recedes. Even the ice in the glasses rearranges itself. People return to the exact moment before everything began, the moment before the humiliation that triggered what was happening now. The narrator breathes softly. Let's go back to when it all looked normal. The plane was still boarding. Malcolm Reeves had stepped into the first-class cabin quietly, carrying nothing but a worn leather briefcase tucked against his side. He wasn't the kind of man who demanded attention. His presence was felt rather than heard, a calm gravity, a maturity that seemed carved into his posture. He placed his briefcase beneath seat 1C, the window seat. He liked windows. He liked watching the lights of cities shrink to specks. It made him feel grounded, in an odd way. A reminder that no matter how chaotic the world became, the earth still rotated, the sky still held its blue, and people still found ways to rise above. But what he didn't see, what he never expected, was the small glance exchanged between the chief flight attendant, Veronica Hayes, and the white, silver-haired man who boarded moments after him. The man was Bradley Mason, a frequent flyer known for his influence in state politics and for having a temper that often earned quiet apologies from staff after he left. Bradley gave Malcolm one long look, not angry, not curious, just dismissive. The kind of look a person gives a stray suitcase blocking their path. The kind of look that says, without words, "You don't belong in my space." Malcolm didn't return the look, didn't even notice it. He was already reviewing a report on his tablet notes for a meeting the next morning in D.C. His company was close to securing a major federal contract that would change everything. Live airport security standards, and maybe even some of the inequalities that haunted the industry. Call it irony, call it timing. But that night, the man shaping the future of aviation safety was about to face an old, familiar wound within the very system he hoped to improve. A flight attendant approached Bradley with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Good evening. Mr. Mason, your usual seat is ready." Bradley nodded toward Malcolm's seat. "That one." The attendant hesitated. Just half a second, but enough for a trained eye to see. "Yeah, sir," she replied, forcing a softer tone. "We'll get everything settled." Malcolm didn't hear the exchange. He was reading, focused, calm. Then the cabin door closed. The last passenger clicked their belt. The announcement tone chimed. Everything looked routine, but routine is often where injustice hides best. When Veronica Hayes walked toward Malcolm, her smile polite but strained, he looked up slowly, sensing not danger, but something colder, something familiar, something he thought he had outgrown. "Sir," she said, "we seem to have a small issue with your seat." A simple sentence, but it was the match that started the fire. The narrator's voice returns, soft but pulsing with a truth that carries weight. This is where the story begins. A small issue, a familiar wound, and a man who'd spent a lifetime learning when to stay silent and when to stand up. The cabin lights brighten again, pulling the audience back to the present moment, back to Malcolm. Standing firmly in the aisle 18 minutes after that small issue turned into a storm. The passengers stare at him with a mix of fear, shock, and dawning recognition. He stands alone, but not shaken. His voice calm as a quiet river cutting through stone, had just ended the careers of an entire crew, and no one in that cabin had any idea what was coming next. The cabin of Flight as 771 still trembled with the echo of Malcolm Reeves's words. The passengers watched in silence, unsure if they were witnessing a moment of discipline or the unraveling of something far deeper. Malcolm stood motionless for a few seconds longer, his eyes steady, his posture calm but grounded. The tension in the air did not come from anger. It came from a quiet conviction, the kind of conviction that forms only after years of carrying wounds, victories, and a sense of responsibility larger than oneself. The scene faded gently, returning the story to the moment before he boarded that flight. It returned to the life of the man they had dismissed so easily. On most days, Malcolm preferred a slow start, not lazy, not indulgent, just intentional. He believed a person set the tone for the entire day in the first quiet minutes after waking. He usually placed his feet on the floor and remained still, letting his breathing settle, listening to the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen, feeling the weight of the world gently pressing onto his shoulders. It was his way of reminding himself that no matter how chaotic the workday might become, he was still in control of his own center. That morning, before the flight that would soon become unforgettable, he moved through his small routines with his familiar sense of steadiness. He brewed coffee using a simple drip machine that had followed him through 3 apartments. He always measured the grounds by eye, never by spoon, confident in the rhythm he had learned from his mother. He filled a mug decorated with fading blue stripes and leaned on the counter for a quiet moment. The apartment around him was intentionally modest. A framed photo of his parents beside his desk, a shelf filled with old engineering books, a pair of running shoes tucked neatly by the door. People often expected the home of a successful chief executive to be extravagant. But Malcolm never needed extravagance. He needed clarity, space, truth. His mother, a woman of unwavering faith and deep tenderness, used to say that too much luxury could cloud a person. His father, a former Navy technician, believed that simplicity kept a mind sharp. Their lessons had shaped Malcolm long before he ever imagined he would lead a company. Those lessons kept him grounded even now, decades after he left the narrow streets of South Memphis. He finished his coffee and let his thoughts drift briefly to the meeting waiting for him in Washington. SkyShield Technologies had spent 2 years developing an aviation security system that could identify threats faster than existing systems. Malcolm believed the project could prevent tragedies. He believed it could save communities and restore trust. But the responsibility weighed on him. Being a black leader in a field where black voices were rare brought its own strain. Any mistake would be magnified. Any misstep would be used as proof of a stereotype he had spent a lifetime dismantling. Despite the pressure, he moved with the calm dignity his father had taught him. His father had been a man of routine, too. Even when illness had begun to steal his strength, he insisted on polishing his boots, folding his shirts, and keeping the porch swept. He believed discipline was not about the world watching. It was about self-respect. Malcolm carried that belief in his chest like a hidden compass. He grabbed his briefcase, checked his boarding pass, and left the apartment with his usual deliberate pace. He did not hurry. He never hurried. Rushing, his father had said, was the fastest way to lose yourself. At the airport, Malcolm walked through the terminal unnoticed, just another traveler among many. He liked it that way. The world saw CEOs as figures with glossy resumes and expensive suits, always accompanied by assistants or security details. Malcolm refused that image. He walked alone, carrying his own bag, greeting employees with the same warmth he offered to colleagues in a conference room. Anyone watching him would think he was a teacher, or perhaps a mentor visiting family. He had a face that carried both quiet intelligence and a softness born from surviving hardship without bitterness. As he approached the gate, a few passengers glanced at him in polite acknowledgement. Nothing unusual, nothing remarkable. The attendants scanning boarding passes offered him the same rehearsed smile they offered everyone else. None of them recognized him, though the airline unknowingly used some of the software his company had designed. He boarded without fuss. He placed his briefcase beneath seat 1C. He checked his documents again, studying data points and proposals for the contract ahead. He was ready, focused, composed. A moment passed, then another, and that was when Bradley Mason entered the cabin, carrying the kind of presence that invited space to clear around him. Bradley walked with a certain assurance, the kind that comes from years of being treated as someone important, someone above inconvenience. He greeted Veronica Hayes with familiarity, placing a hand briefly on her arm. She laughed softly, a sound practiced for men she needed to please professionally. Malcolm did not look up. His mind remained fixed on the upcoming presentation, the research team, the quiet pride he felt when one of his young engineers cracked a complex algorithm the previous week. It was only when Veronica approached him with a smile that did not feel genuine that he sensed something shifting in the air. The tone she used had the weight of someone who believed she had authority over the moment, authority over him. That tone always found him, no matter where he went, no matter what title he earned. He looked at her with quiet respect, but in his chest he felt the old, familiar tightening, a memory, a warning, a wound he had learned to carry without letting it control him. The moment she said there was an issue with his seat, he felt more than confusion. He felt an echo of every moment he had been made to step aside, every hall monitor who questioned why he was in an honors class, every store owner who watched him more closely than the others, every whispered assumption about who belonged where. The pain did not show on his face. He did not allow that, but he felt it. Still, he nodded gently and prepared himself to listen before acting. His mother used to say a person's strength was measured not by how loudly they shouted, but by how well they stayed centered in a storm. He listened, he breathed, he steadied himself. He did all of this without knowing that before the night was over, the entire crew of AS-771 would stand in front of him in shock, and that long-suppressed truths would be dragged into the open. This was the part of Malcolm no one ever saw at first glance. A man shaped by patience, a man who carried both restraint and power with the same steady hands, a man who had survived enough storms to recognize the scent of one before it formed. As the cabin hummed softly around him, the passengers unaware of the moment about to unfold, Malcolm closed the report on his tablet. A quiet voice inside him whispered, "Here we go again." He did not yet know what the night would demand of him, but he sensed that dignity, the very thing his father had called his last uniform, was about to be tested once again. The story paused at this quiet threshold. The storm had not yet broken, but it was close, very close. The hum of the airplane softened once more, fading into the background like a distant memory. The present dissolved, and the story drifted toward the years that had shaped Malcolm Reeves long before he ever stepped onto flight as 771. If someone in that cabin had understood where he came from, perhaps they would have looked at him differently. Perhaps they would have known that a man does not carry that kind of stillness unless life has demanded it from him again and again. Memory opened like a door. South Memphis appeared in muted colors, a neighborhood with cracked sidewalks and chain-link fences, where children played basketball under flickering streetlights. The houses were old, their porches weathered by strong seasons and stronger stories. Malcolm grew up in one of those houses, a small one painted in a shade of faded green that his mother insisted made the street feel kinder. Inside that home lived 3 lives bound together. His father, James Reeves, had served as a Navy technician. He kept the house neat in the same methodical way he once maintained machinery on a military vessel. Every tool hung on the wall exactly where it belonged. Every shoe was lined up by the door as if preparing for inspection. Nothing was out of place, not even grief. His mother, Lorna Reeves, was a nurse who worked rotating hospital shifts. Her smile was soft, even when exhaustion lingered beneath her eyes. She had a talent for making simple meals taste like comfort and had an unwavering belief that kindness could outlast cruelty if someone practiced it long enough. And then there was Malcolm, a quiet boy with a gift for taking things apart and putting them back together. Radios, cheap clocks, old alarm systems. He wanted to understand how everything worked, not out of ambition, but out of curiosity. His father encouraged it, handing him broken hardware from the local repair shop. "Fix it, son. A broken thing deserves another chance." Malcolm carried that phrase into adulthood, though he rarely admitted how deeply it lived in him. Growing up in that neighborhood was a mix of warmth and weight. There were neighbors who watched out for one another, sharing groceries when times were tight. There were also nights when police cars rolled through the streets with windows half lowered and suspicious eyes scanning faces even before questions were asked. Malcolm learned early how to keep his hands visible and his words calm. His father saw everything. He understood the danger of a simple misunderstanding. He taught Malcolm to stay composed even when he felt humiliated, reminding him that the world often judged before it listened. He taught him to choose his battles and to walk away from the ones that were traps disguised as confrontations. One memory clung to Malcolm with a kind of permanence that shaped the man he would become. He was 13 when he walked into a local hardware store looking for a small screwdriver. He had saved money from mowing lawns to buy it. The moment he entered, the store owner followed him down every aisle, staying so close that Malcolm could hear the man's breath. The owner did not ask if he needed help. He simply hovered, eyes sharp, ready to accuse. Malcolm pretended not to notice, but inside, something tightened, something small but painful. When he brought the screwdriver to the counter, the owner looked at him as though expecting him to run off without paying. Outside the store, Malcolm felt heat rising in his chest. His father noticed instantly. What happened? Son Malcolm hesitated, embarrassed to say the truth. "The store owner thinks I am trouble." James Reeves placed a firm hand on his shoulder. His voice was steady, not harsh, just full of conviction. "People who fear you will try to make you fear yourself. Remember this, you do not owe anyone your shame." Those words carved themselves into Malcolm's memory. Life tested those words often. Teachers who doubted his place in advanced classes. Security guards who asked for his student ID every single time he walked onto campus, though other students walked past without question. Friends who warned him to dress a certain way to avoid being mistaken for someone dangerous. Each experience created small fractures that would have broken someone less resilient. But Malcolm learned to breathe through them. He learned to protect his sense of self the way his father had protected their home. Quietly, firmly, without seeking applause. During his late teens, tragedy forced him to confront more than discrimination. His father grew ill, and Malcolm watched the strongest person he knew become weaker each month. The illness was slow, and the house grew heavy with worry. Yet James refused to surrender to despair. On better days, he sat with Malcolm on the porch, watching cars roll down the street. One evening, Malcolm asked the question that had been sitting heavy on his heart. Why do people treat us the way they do? His father looked at him with calm eyes that held both fatigue and wisdom. Because they do not know you yet, and some will never want to know. But your worth is not in their hands. Malcolm swallowed hard. How do I make them see me differently? James shook his head. You do not live for their vision of you. You live for what you know is right. Dignity is your last uniform. Once you lose that, nothing else fits. 3 weeks after that conversation, his father passed away. Malcolm felt as if the ground beneath him shifted, leaving him exposed to a cold world without the man who taught him everything. Yet grief did not harden him. It anchored him. He understood then what it meant to carry dignity not as pride, but as a responsibility. His mother continued raising him with tenderness, reminding him that strength was not the absence of vulnerability. It was the ability to keep moving even when your heart felt cracked. Malcolm excelled academically. He earned scholarships and worked part-time jobs while studying engineering. Many doors opened, but not without resistance. He became used to people underestimating him before he spoke. He became used to being the only black person in meeting rooms. He learned how to sit upright even when anxiety tried to tighten his spine. Through every challenge, the lessons of his parents held him steady. Fix what you can. Walk away from what harms you. Carry yourself with dignity. Stay calm when others expect you to shatter. All those memories flowed beneath the surface of the man who boarded at 771. They shaped every breath he took in that cabin. They shaped the way he handled Veronica's tone, Bradley's entitlement, and the humiliation that followed. They shaped the decision he would soon make, the one that would silence an entire crew. The passengers on that plane did not know any of this. They only saw a man who looked controlled and unbothered. They did not see the years of practice it took for him to hold that stillness. But the truth was simple. Every quiet breath Malcolm Reeves took came from a lifetime of storms he had learned to walk through without losing himself. The memory of South Memphis slowly dissolved, fading like warm breath on cool glass, leaving behind only the steady hum of the airplane. The present returned, settling over the cabin of AS 771 with a quiet heaviness. Dr. Malcolm Reeves sat in seat 1C, unaware that the past he carried so silently was about to collide with a moment that felt painfully familiar. He had always liked the window. He liked the quiet it offered, the shelter it created. It felt like a small refuge from crowded airports, noisy terminals, and the steady demands of leadership. That seat had become a kind of ritual for him, a place where he could breathe and gather his thoughts before important meetings. He opened the folder in his lap and reviewed the final pages of the Sky Shield proposal. Clean numbers, clear trajectories, months of research condensed into a single presentation. He tapped one page lightly, reminding himself why he worked as hard as he did. Better systems, safer skies, fewer tragedies caused by outdated technology. He was still studying the document when the aisle around him shifted. Someone approached with a quiet authority that did not need announcing. Malcolm sensed movement, but did not look up at first. He heard the soft tread of polished shoes, the faint rustle of a uniform sleeve, and an inhale that sounded like a person preparing to deliver news they believed they had the right to deliver. When he finally lifted his eyes, the first thing he saw was a smile, a practiced smile, a smile that looked like it had been trained more than it had been meant. It belonged to Veronica Hayes. Her posture was impeccable, shoulders straight, chin lifted, every gesture precise. Yet the softness that service work usually required was missing. She carried the air of someone accustomed to commanding the cabin, and perhaps more importantly, accustomed to being agreed with. Her voice came lightly, almost pleasant on the surface, though Malcolm caught an undertone of something firmer. "Sir, may I speak with you for a moment?" Malcolm nodded, polite as always. "Of course." She held her smile, but did not reassure him. Instead, she glanced around as if checking whether any passengers were watching. When she leaned slightly closer, Malcolm felt the shift in her energy. It was the same tone he had heard from teachers who doubted him and from supervisors who assumed he could be brushed aside without consequence. "We seem to have a small issue with your seat." The words dropped gently, but they landed with a familiar weight. A weight Malcolm knew too well. "A small issue." He repeated the phrase in his mind, letting it sit there, not reacting too quickly. His father had taught him years ago to never rush inside moments that felt disrespectful. People expected emotion from him. They expected anger or defensiveness. He had learned long ago that calmness disarmed more than any raised voice ever could. He closed the folder softly and gave her his full attention. "What seems to be the issue?" Veronica clasped her hands, choosing her next words with deliberate care. "It appears that seat 1C has been assigned to one of our premium recurring passengers. It must have been an error in the system. We need you to relocate so he can be accommodated." Her tone remained professional, but there was an edge beneath it, the kind that implied the conversation was less about policy and more about expectation. Malcolm waited a moment, letting silence do its work. He had learned that silence often revealed more than questions did. "I checked in early," he said calmly. "My boarding pass confirms 1C. Veronica offered another smile, though this one almost flickered. "Yes, but our priority customers have established seating. We try to maintain consistency. It keeps things running smoothly. It keeps things running smoothly." That sentence pressed against something old inside him. Something tired. Something that remembered the store owner in Memphis. The teacher who questioned his placement in advanced math. The security guard who double-checked his badge even after greeting the students before him without looking twice. He breathed slowly. "I understand consistency," he replied, still even. "But this is the seat I paid for." Before Veronica could answer, another presence arrived. A heavier presence, Bradley Mason. He stood beside her with a sense of ownership that required no words. He did not smile. He did not need to. His expression alone carried the same message his eyes had delivered earlier when he walked past Malcolm. A message shaped by assumption. "This is my seat," Bradley said, pointing at 1C as though directing staff at one of his fundraisers. "I sit here every week. Every week." The cabin seemed to inhale and hold its breath. Malcolm lifted his chin slightly, not confrontational, just steady. "This is my seat today?" The softness in Veronica's expression thinned. She glanced at Bradley, then at Malcolm, then back again. Her loyalty was clear. Captain Lewis approached from the front of the cabin with a posture that filled the narrow aisle. His uniform was crisp, his presence firm, the unmistakable weight of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "Is there a problem here?" Veronica straightened. "Seat assignment conflict. We are resolving it." Captain Lewis looked at Bradley first with a nod of respect, then turned to Malcolm. The difference in his gaze was subtle but unmistakable. "Sir, we cannot delay departure. I need your cooperation so we can remain on schedule." Cooperation. The word was too familiar. It had been used to silence, to pressure, to disguise one-sided decisions as mutual understanding. Malcolm felt the old ache in his chest. Not anger, disappointment. This was not the first time someone had asked him to cooperate for the convenience of others, for the comfort of others, for the assumptions of others. He remained calm. "I am cooperative. I simply expect to keep the seat I was assigned." Captain Lewis shifted, irritated by the firmness in Malcolm's voice. He lowered his tone, as if addressing someone who needed instruction. "Seat assignments fall under crew discretion when necessary." Necessary. Malcolm felt the meaning beneath that word, felt the tension in his ribs, felt the quiet sting of being made small in a place where he expected fairness. He met the captain's eyes. "Is there an operational or safety reason for this reassignment?" His voice was gentle, controlled. The captain hesitated, just long enough for the truth to show. Veronica stepped in quickly. "Sir, please do not make this difficult. We need you to move so we can accommodate our regular guest. There is an open seat in the back. Everyone will be more comfortable if we proceed." Everyone. The moment stretched. Malcolm looked around. He saw the lowered gazes, the half-curious, half-tense stares, the people who recognized the tone, but chose silence because silence was easier. He had been here before. Different room, different faces, same story. He took a breath that felt deeper than the cabin allowed. He gathered himself the way he once watched his father gather strength in a hospital bed. Then he spoke quietly. "I will move, but understand this. I am moving, so this moment does not escalate into something unfairly used against me, not because your request is justified." A hush rolled through the aisle. A few passengers shifted uncomfortably. One woman murmured something under her breath about injustice, though her voice remained soft, almost hidden. Malcolm stood, lifting his briefcase with measured care. His dignity stayed with him, even as he stepped away from the seat he paid for. He walked toward the back without rushing, every step a reminder of the storm forming inside him, a storm he refused to let loose. Not yet. He sat in seat 26B. The space was tight. The air carried the scent of meals served earlier that day. The armrests were scratched, and the legroom felt painfully narrow. He breathed. He steadied his pulse. He reminded himself that storms only mattered if you knew when to release them. Seat 26B held Malcolm Reeves like a space far too small for the weight he carried. The cushion felt thin, the armrest cramped, the air slightly warmer than the front of the plane. He placed his briefcase carefully beneath the seat and leaned back, letting the cabin noise settle around him. Passengers near him exchanged uneasy glances. Some had only caught fragments of what happened. Others had seen everything and pretended not to. One man lifted his phone, checked something, then lowered it again as if unsure whether recording the moment would make him part of a story he feared touching. Malcolm folded his hands in his lap. His breathing remained steady, though his chest felt tight. It was not the space that bothered him. He had lived through small spaces. He had grown up in rooms where he could hear water dripping through thin walls and neighbors arguing through a cracked window frame. No. This discomfort came from something deeper, something painfully familiar. A soft voice from the row behind him broke the quiet around him. "I saw what happened." He turned slightly. A woman with brown curls and kind eyes leaned forward. Her voice trembled as though she was mustering courage she had not used in some time. "It was wrong," she said. Malcolm offered a gentle nod. He appreciated her words, even if she whispered them only now that the confrontation had passed. "Thank you," he replied. She started to say something else but stopped when another passenger glanced her way. Her shoulders sank as if caught between speaking truth and protecting her own comfort. Malcolm recognized the struggle. He had seen it countless times. People were quick to feel sympathy, but slow to step into the light, where sympathy required action. A few minutes passed. The engines vibrated beneath the floor. The cabin crew moved about as though nothing had happened. Voices rose and fell in small pockets. A child 2 rows ahead giggled at something on a tablet, unaware of the tension woven through the flight. Then a young flight attendant approached. She was slender, with clear eyes and an expression that suggested she had carried her own share of quiet fears. Her name tag read Mia Turner. She leaned in with a professionalism that masked urgency. "Sir, can I get you anything?" Her voice was soft enough not to draw attention, but steady enough that Malcolm sensed the sincerity behind it. "I am fine. Thank you." She hesitated as if debating whether to say more. After a moment, she lowered her tone. "I am sorry for what happened." Malcolm studied her eyes. They held the same mixture he had seen in young staff members over the years. Determination wrapped in caution. Compassion pressed up against the fear of losing their job. "You did nothing wrong," he said. Her gaze flickered toward the front of the plane, where Veronica Hayes poured sparkling water for Bradley Mason, with a smile far warmer than any she had offered Malcolm a short time earlier. "People have complained about her before," Mia whispered. "About the captain, too." She paused, then added something even softer. "But nothing changes." Malcolm's heart tightened. Something in her tone reminded him of his younger self, someone trying to stay hopeful while navigating a world ready to clip the wings of anyone who spoke too boldly. "Thank you for checking on me," Malcolm said quietly. She nodded, straightened her posture, and moved down the aisle. Malcolm let his gaze drift toward the window. Clouds drifted by like slow-moving rivers of white. The sky held a soft glow that pressed gently against the glass. Yet inside the cabin, everything felt unsettled. That kind of atmosphere did not vanish quickly. It clung to people. It shaped the way they sat, the way they breathed. A man across the aisle cleared his throat. "You handled that better than most would have." His voice was not loud, but his gaze was steady. He looked to be in his early 50s, with gray at his temples and a briefcase at his feet. Malcolm nodded politely. Tension does not help anyone. It only gives others an excuse to misinterpret who you are. The man studied him thoughtfully. "Still, you should not have had to give up your seat." Malcolm did not answer right away. Instead, he folded his fingers together and let a quiet moment pass. "Life teaches you what is worth fighting in the moment," he said slowly, "and what is worth holding until the time is right." The man nodded, as though he understood something deeper beneath the words. After several minutes, the aircraft lifted into the sky. The cabin tilted gently upward. The engines rumbled with a growing rhythm. People settled, and the familiar quiet of flight returned. Almost, the silence held a tension that felt alive. Bradley Mason reclined in seat 1C, comfortable and unbothered. Veronica continued her task with precision, though her eyes avoided the mid-cabin for reasons she refused to acknowledge even to herself. Captain Lewis remained in the cockpit, unaware that his decision would soon become something far greater than a minor passenger inconvenience. Malcolm opened his folder again. Though he did not read the words, his mind wandered back to his father's voice. "A man's dignity is not taken in one moment," his father once told him. "It is taken piece by piece, until he no longer recognizes what he gave away. Malcolm closed the folder. Not today. From the corner of his eye, he noticed Mia Turner again. She was taking drink orders when another attendant bumped her arm. A small accident, but when Veronica turned around, she gave Mia a look sharp enough to cut. Mia flinched. Malcolm saw it clearly. The captain's intercom crackled. We will be reaching cruising altitude soon. Please remain seated. The sound faded, leaving a thin stillness behind it. Malcolm exhaled, long and measured. He had spent years building a company that valued clarity and fairness. His employees trusted him because he listened. He advocated for them. He created a work culture where no one needed to fear small humiliations disguised as routine decisions. He had believed that dignity should not be something a person had to earn. It should be something they were born deserving. Watching the crew now, he realized these workers lived in fear of voices like Veronica's. They were cautious even when they had done nothing wrong. They carried stress in their shoulders and silence in their eyes. Their kindness was quiet, their resistance invisible, and their vulnerability hidden beneath flawless uniforms. The injustice done to him was part of a pattern. He could feel it. He could sense it in Mia's trembling voice, and the passengers who whispered apologies only after danger had passed. He felt something shift within him. Not anger, not a desire for revenge. Resolve. The kind of resolve that comes from a lifetime of being tested by forces that underestimated him. He straightened in his seat, gaze firm but calm. The pieces of something larger were forming. A direction, a decision, a quiet promise to himself that this moment would not pass without consequence. Passengers around him sensed a change. They could not define it, but they noticed the air around him settling differently, like the calm that settles before a wave rises. Malcolm looked toward the front of the plane. He watched Veronica laugh at something Bradley said. He saw the way her shoulders eased only when she turned away from the rest of the cabin. The storm within him did not rage. It focused. What had happened in Seat 1C would not end there. He would decide when to let the real storm begin. The cabin eventually settled into a hesitant quiet, the kind that felt thin and fragile, as if a single breath could shatter it. Seatbelt signs dimmed. A few passengers relaxed into their screens. Others pretended to sleep. Yet beneath the calm, something uneasy pulsed, a feeling that the air itself remembered what had happened in first class. Malcolm Reeves remained still, not defeated, not broken, simply still. Stillness had always been his shield, a quiet space where he gathered thought before action. He had learned that silence had its own strength. It gave him room to breathe, to choose, to rise without letting anger guide him into traps set by others. He rested his elbows lightly on the armrests and closed his eyes for a brief moment. He allowed himself to feel the discomfort of the narrow seat, the injustice pressing like a stone against his chest. But he also felt something else, something steady in his core, something his father had planted there long ago. You hold your ground by holding your breath at the right moment. A soft tap pulled him from thought. Mia Turner stood beside him again, her hands clasped in front of her to hide the slight tremor running through her fingers. "Sir," she whispered, "can I offer you water or tea?" Her voice carried a mix of respect and worry. She glanced around to check if Veronica saw her. When she noticed the chief attendant was turned away, she relaxed slightly. "Water is fine," Malcolm said. She placed the cup on his tray, but before she stepped back, she leaned in closer. "I want you to know," she murmured, barely above a breath, "you are not the first. They have done this to others." Malcolm's eyes opened fully. Others Mia nodded. Many. Not always this obvious, but always the same pattern. Certain passengers get priority. The same people, the same tone, the same decisions. A few have filed complaints, but nothing happens. The files disappear. Her expression held an ache he recognized instantly. The ache of witnessing something wrong. Knowing you are too small in the system to fight it without losing the job that pays your bills. Thank you, Malcolm said, his tone warm, reassuring. She swallowed, as though relieved he did not dismiss her. When she returned to the aisle, she walked with renewed care, aware that even kindness had to be measured in that cabin. A few minutes passed. The plane reached cruising altitude. The lights dimmed to a soft glow. Malcolm sipped his water, then placed the cup aside. His shoulders eased slightly. The tension did not leave him, but it shifted, becoming a focus rather than a wound. A quiet breath, then another. The passenger beside him turned his head slightly. I know who you are. Malcolm looked up. The man was in his early 40s, wearing a navy pullover and carrying a laptop bag tucked beneath the seat. His voice held no arrogance, only recognition. You are the founder of SkyShield Technologies. Right. I watched your interview last year. Malcolm gave a small nod. Yes. The man inhaled slowly, searching for the right words. I saw how they spoke to you. I should have said something. Malcolm met his eyes. It is not easy to speak when the room expects silence. The man nodded, looking ashamed. I just wanted to say, you did not deserve that. Malcolm appreciated the honesty. Most people apologized only in the safety of distance. This man apologized with the weight of a witness, admitting his own stillness. Thank you, Malcolm replied. It means more than you think. The man looked down at his hands, then back at him. Will you report them? Malcolm breathed deeply, his voice steady as he spoke. I will address it, but not out of anger. The man offered a respectful nod, sensing the calm beneath the words. After he turned away, Malcolm sat quietly again. But now, something had shifted. The shame others expected him to feel did not sit in his chest. Instead, a sense of responsibility began to grow, slow but unstoppable. He thought back to the young engineers he mentored, the interns who looked at him with admiration because he represented what they dreamed of becoming. He thought of the communities he visited during tech outreach programs, children who saw him not just as a CEO, but as proof that people who looked like them did not have to shrink in rooms built to exclude them. His voice inside sharpened. This moment is not only about you. The aisle lights flickered softly. A cart rolled toward him. Mia approached again, preparing to offer snacks. She kept her eyes down, hands steady but nervous. When she stopped at his row, she lowered her voice. Captain Lewis and Veronica are talking about you in the galley. Malcolm lifted his gaze, talking about what she hesitated, then spoke carefully. They said you looked upset, that if you complain, they will claim you were uncooperative. A familiar sting touched Malcolm's chest. Not pain, recognition, the old story, the predictable shifts of blame, the rewriting of truth before truth could speak for itself. Thank you for telling me, he said gently. She nodded and continued down the aisle. For several minutes, Malcolm stayed still, letting the plane's soft vibration guide his thoughts. Outside the window, the sky stretched endlessly, a quiet canvas of dark blue and scattered stars. He watched the horizon as if searching for clarity in that vastness. Then his phone vibrated softly in his pocket. He pulled it out, switching to airplane safe mode with onboard Wi-Fi. A single message appeared from his chief operating officer. Aaron Miles. Hope your flight is smooth. Everything ready for the meeting? Malcolm stared at the message for a long moment. Smooth. The word felt almost ironic. He typed slowly. We need to discuss something urgent after I land. Prepare a private room. He placed the phone face down. He did not need to think through the details yet. His instinct already knew this moment would require more than frustration. It would require precision, strategy, integrity, just as he had always lived. A faint rustle reached him. A teenager across the aisle held a phone angled discreetly, watching a short video. Malcolm did not pay attention at first, but then he heard a whisper. This is him, that man they moved. Malcolm turned slightly. The boy looked startled, caught between embarrassment and curiosity. Someone filmed it, the boy said. It is already online. Malcolm's chest tightened. Not fear, awareness. Stories like this spread quickly, often reshaped by strangers before truth settled. May I see it? Malcolm asked. The boy hesitated, then held up the phone. The recording was grainy but clear enough. Malcolm's calm face, Veronica's firm tone, Bradley standing beside her with that dismissive posture, a few passengers watching from their seats, a few averted eyes, a few too willing to stay silent. Malcolm handed the phone back. Thank you, he said quietly. The boy nodded, cheeks red. As Malcolm sat back, a quiet certainty settled into his bones. The truth was no longer contained in one cabin. It had begun to move beyond it, carried by someone with shaking hands and the courage to capture what others ignored. The cabin air felt heavier, the atmosphere more aware. The storm inside Malcolm did not explode. It expanded, slow, controlled, inevitable. He straightened in his seat, his posture firm and clear. He could feel the path forming, almost step by step. Not revenge, not outburst. Something measured, something purposeful, something that would not only address today, but protect the ones who would come after him. He gazed down the aisle, watching Veronica laugh with Bradley again. He whispered a quiet truth to himself. You picked the wrong man to underestimate. The sky outside the window darkened into a soft ink blue, scattered with faint stars that shimmered like distant memories. Inside the cabin of OS 771, the light remained low and warm, casting long shadows across the floor. People rested quietly, yet the atmosphere felt anything but peaceful. Something unspoken drifted through the air, a quiet awareness, a feeling that the injustice earlier in the flight had begun to ripple far beyond a simple seat reassignment. Malcolm Reeves sat in 26B, hands resting loosely on his lap. The video he had just seen replayed in his mind, not in anger, but in contemplation. Grainy footage, raised eyebrows, whispers captured in the background. The moment he stood, calm yet firm. The moment Veronica's expression shifted when she realized she would not win the argument with grace. It was all there, truth recorded by a stranger too young to know how powerful a single moment could become. Malcolm's breathing stayed steady, though a sense of responsibility settled on him like a heavy coat. He had always known that moments like this were never just his own. They belonged to everyone who had been pushed aside quietly, asked to lower their voice, or reminded subtly that their presence felt inconvenient. He closed his eyes gently. You do not choose the fire, his father once told him, but you choose how you stand inside it. The sound of soft footsteps returned him to the cabin. Mia Turner stood beside him again, holding a small packet of almonds and a paper napkin. She placed them on his tray without speaking at first, her expression filled with something between guilt and determination. I thought you might want something to eat, she whispered. "Thank you," Malcolm replied. But she did not leave. She lingered, glancing up the aisle to make sure Veronica was nowhere near. Her voice dropped lower. "They are not finished talking about you." Malcolm looked at her gently, waiting. She continued. "I heard Captain Lewis tell Veronica that if the situation becomes complicated, they will claim you raised your voice. They think that is enough to justify moving you." A slow inhale steadied Malcolm's pulse. He had expected something like this. Stories rarely protected men like him. They protected the ones who controlled the narrative, the ones who held power, even if they did not deserve it. "Thank you for telling me," he said. Mia's eyes glistened with something like resentment. Not toward Malcolm, but toward the system around her. "We are supposed to treat people equally," she whispered. "But some crew members do not believe in equality when they think no one is watching." He could hear the tremble she tried to hide. "How long have you been working here?" he asked softly. "Almost 3 years. And how long have you seen this type of behavior?" Her pause said more than words. "Too long." Malcolm nodded slowly. "You deserve a workplace where fear is not part of the uniform." Her throat tightened, and she forced a small smile before pushing her card away to avoid suspicion. When she disappeared behind the row ahead, Malcolm allowed his expression to shift, only slightly, enough to show a flicker of frustration. He rarely let irritation reach his face, but this time felt different. This was not a misunderstanding or a moment of poor service. This was a pattern, woven through the decisions of people who believed their power insulated them from consequence. He leaned back and inhaled through his nose, then exhaled slowly. The passenger beside him glanced over again. "Trouble does not follow you," the man murmured. "Some people just do not know how to see clearly." Malcolm offered a grateful look. The man continued, "I have flown with this airline often. I have seen arguments about upgrades and seat changes, but what they did to you was intentional, not a mistake. You kept your composure through all of it." Malcolm nodded thoughtfully. "Composure is often mistaken for acceptance," he said, "but composure is another form of preparation." The man understood immediately. "What will you do?" Malcolm considered his answer, choosing his words with deliberate care. "I will respond with truth, and I will respond in a way that helps more people than it hurts." The man studied him for a moment, then nodded with quiet respect. A few rows ahead, a woman wearing headphones slid one side off her ear and leaned slightly toward the aisle. "Sir, I recorded part of what happened too," she said softly. "If you need it, I will send it to you. People should not get away with treating others like that." The sincerity in her voice warmed the space around them. "Thank you," Malcolm said. "I appreciate your courage." She smiled shyly and returned to her seat. Courage, a small word, yet it carried weight in a cabin that had chosen silence for far too long. The aircraft continued its path through the sky, the engines creating a steady vibration beneath the floor. Malcolm folded his hands again and watched a faint cloud pass below. In the dim reflection of the window, he saw himself, calm, conflicted, focused. Aaron Miles would already be preparing for their meeting later. Malcolm trusted him. Aaron had stood beside him through difficult seasons of the company's growth. He listened, he understood nuance, and he never shied away from uncomfortable truth. The upcoming conversation would not be a simple one. It would require strategic planning and a level of precision that Malcolm had mastered through years of leadership. It was not about retaliation. It was about accountability and protection. Protection for people like Mia. Protection for passengers who had been pushed aside. protection for the dignity his father believed was worth more than money or recognition. The aisle lights flickered again as a signal. Veronica Hayes walked through the cabin with her chin raised. Her steps carried a subtle arrogance, as though the earlier incident had already faded from relevance. When she reached Malcolm's row, she did not look at him. She avoided his eyes with intentional indifference. That small action revealed more about her than anything she had said openly. People reveal their truth not in their boldness, but in the silences they choose. Malcolm watched her move toward the front of the plane. Bradley Mason lifted his glass for a refill, and Veronica hurried to assist him with a smile that resembled loyalty more than professionalism. A quiet voice returned Malcolm to the present. "Sir," the man beside him said softly, "you know what I think is strange." What he leaned closer. "The way they are handling this. It is almost as if they have done it before, and they assume nothing will happen." Malcolm held his gaze. Perhaps that assumption is what needs to change. A long silence stretched between them, steady and meaningful. The man nodded slowly. "For what it is worth," he said, "I hope you are the one to change it." Malcolm looked forward again. His heartbeat was even, his thoughts clear. He no longer felt the sting of humiliation, only a sharpened conviction. Mia Turner walked past once more and paused near his seat without turning. "I will help you however I can," she whispered, her voice low but resolute. "People like them count on people like us staying scared. But I think they misjudged you." Malcolm felt the truth in her words settle deep in his chest. They did. He did not have to raise his voice. He did not have to threaten anyone. He simply had to decide. The storm gathering around him had not erupted yet, but its direction had become clear. It would not be a storm of chaos. It would be a storm of truth. The aircraft glided steadily through the high-altitude air, its wings carving a quiet path across the sky. Inside the cabin, the hum remained gentle, almost soothing, yet the atmosphere held a tension that refused to settle. People shifted in their seats, not because of turbulence, but because the earlier confrontation had left an invisible mark that no one quite knew how to erase. Malcolm Reeves sat motionless, gazing at the soft glow of the aisle lights. Pieces of the evening replayed in his mind, each moment carrying an echo of something larger. He had not expected the flight to become a mirror of the very inequality he had spent years working against. Yet here it was, unfolding with a slow cruelty that reminded him how often comfort was granted to those already comfortable. He let a long breath move through him, steady and controlled. A woman across the aisle turned slightly toward him. Her voice hovered just above a whisper. "Sir, I keep thinking about what happened. I should have said something." Malcolm met her eyes. They were filled with regret, the kind that sits deep in the chest, long after the moment for action passes. "You are not alone in that feeling," he replied gently. She nodded, her lips tightening as if holding back emotions she did not wish to release in a crowded cabin. "I have 2 boys," she said quietly. I tell them to stand up for what is right. But sitting here today, I feel like I failed to do that myself." Malcolm shook his head softly. "We often know what is right," he said, "but the courage to act sometimes arrives late. What matters is that you see it now." Her eyes softened with gratitude. She placed a hand over her heart for a brief moment, as if acknowledging his grace. A slow moment passed. Then a deep voice spoke from behind. "This is not the first time I have seen something like this on a plane." Malcolm turned slightly. The man sitting behind him leaned forward, resting his forearms on his knees. His face carried a weary strength. the kind that comes from living enough life to understand how things often unfold. I work in mediation, he continued, corporate disputes, safety investigations. I have reviewed cases where decisions were justified with policy language but rooted in bias. Malcolm listened carefully. It always starts small, the man said. A tone, a seat reassigned, a label like uncooperative added quietly to a file. People do not realize how these small decisions ripple outward. Malcolm nodded once. They ripple, he repeated. He knew this all too well. Small acts of disrespect laid the groundwork for bigger injustices. What happened in Seat 1C was not isolated. It was symptomatic of a system that rewarded those who protected each other while silencing the ones harmed by their choices. The man behind him continued. What you did back there, he said, keeping calm, that takes discipline. Discipline is easier when anger does not control the room, Malcolm replied. A brief silence settled again, comfortable this time, like two people sharing understanding without requiring more words. Ahead in the cabin. Bradley Mason's laughter broke through the quiet, loud enough to draw glances. Veronica stood near him, smiling with the kind of charm reserved for passengers she wished to impress. Their conversation drifted back, carried on a tone smug enough to reveal their belief that the matter was behind them. Malcolm watched them with an expression that did not change, but something in his chest shifted. Not hurt, not fear, insight. Their behavior revealed exactly the pattern Mia had spoken about. This was not a simple incident. It was a structure, a culture, a system rooted in subtle entitlement and quiet intimidation. A soft sound beside him signaled someone had approached again. Mia Turner held an envelope-sized slip of paper, folded neatly to hide its contents. She kept her eyes down, her posture careful. "Sir," she whispered, "this is from someone who wanted to help but was afraid to speak. She asked me to give it to you." Malcolm accepted the folded note. "Thank you." "Mia." She stepped away quickly, her shoulders tense as she returned to the front of the cabin. The contrast between her cautious movements and Veronica's confident strut made Malcolm's jaw tighten. He unfolded the paper slowly. Inside, a message was written in quick cursive. "This happened to my sister last year." She complained. They marked her record as disruptive. She was banned from upgrades without explanation. Do not trust internal channels. Protect yourself. Malcolm's heartbeat slowed, not from surprise, but from confirmation. This was a pattern, documented by witnesses, repeated over years. He folded the paper again and placed it inside his briefcase. It joined the mental file he was building, piece by piece. He would not forget. A soft vibration buzzed gently in his pocket. He pulled out his phone and checked the text. "Aaron Miles, everything all right on your end? I saw a post online. Looks like someone filmed something." Malcolm stared at the glowing screen for a long moment. The world outside the cabin already knew. He typed slowly. "We will talk when I land. There is more to this than a video," Aaron replied almost instantly. "Understood. I will be ready." Malcolm returned the phone to the seat pocket and leaned back. His eyes drifted toward the cabin curtain separating the first-class section from the rest of the plane. The fabric swayed slightly with the movement of the aircraft, almost symbolic in its division. A barrier, both literal and figurative. His father's words echoed again. A man must know the weight he carries, and when to let that weight speak for itself. Another passenger 2 rows ahead turned in his seat, clearly contemplating whether to speak. After a moment, he summoned the resolve. "I have children at home," he said softly. "I tell them that people are treated equally. What I saw today reminds me that we still have far to go." Malcolm's reply came gentle but firm. "We teach equality because we hope for it, but hope does not grow without action." The man nodded, eyes lowered in reflection. A sense of thoughtful silence spread through the surrounding seats, as though passengers who had stayed silent earlier were now awakening to the truth that witnessing injustice places a responsibility upon the witness as well. Malcolm sensed this shift. Something in the cabin had changed, not loudly, not dramatically, quietly, like water rising until it reached a point it could not be ignored. A flight attendant announcement interrupted the moment. "Cabin crew will begin service soon. Please remain seated." Malcolm felt a calm certainty gather in him. Not tension, not a storm ready to erupt. A horizon, a direction, a decision. Bradley Mason's voice cut through the air again. "People need to know their place." It was spoken casually, aimed at Veronica, but carried clearly enough for Malcolm to hear. Malcolm's expression did not flinch. He simply whispered in the quiet of his own mind, "I know mine, and I will remind you of yours." This moment would not end when the plane touched down. He would see to that. The aircraft drifted forward through the vast night sky, its engines humming in a long, steady note that felt almost meditative. Yet within the cabin of AS 771, calm existed only on the surface. Beneath it lay a quiet storm, built not from loud conflict, but from a sequence of small truths gathering weight. Malcolm Reeves remained seated in 26B, posture straight, fingertips resting lightly against each other. His expression was calm, but his thoughts moved with precision. Every word spoken on this flight, every glance traded in silence, every whisper of fear from employees who were supposed to feel safe, had begun to assemble into something undeniable. He had always believed that small injustices were the roots of larger ones. Tonight had proven that belief painfully accurate. A faint rustling sounded to his left. The teenager who had shown him the video earlier shifted in his seat, glancing over as if wanting to speak again. After hesitating, he leaned slightly closer. "Sir," he whispered, "people online are already talking about what happened." Malcolm turned his head. Already the boy nodded quickly, his eyes wide with a mix of awe and worry. Someone posted the clip on a travel forum. Then it spread to a few other places. "People are upset. They are asking your name. Some say they recognize you from the news." Malcolm's chest rose in a slow breath. It was not fear that filled him, but awareness. Attention could be a tool or weapon, depending on who shaped the narrative first. "Thank you for telling me," Malcolm said gently. The boy nodded, relieved to be taken seriously. The man seated behind Malcolm, the one who worked in mediation, leaned forward again. "If the video is spreading already," he said quietly, "the airline may try to anticipate outcomes. They might build a version of events before you can speak." Malcolm nodded thoughtfully. "That is why truth must stay clear." The man agreed with a slow inhale. "Moments like this," he said, "can reveal the entire culture of an organization." Malcolm looked ahead toward the closed curtain separating first class from the rest of the cabin. Bradley Mason's voice drifted occasionally, faint, but still touched with the arrogance of someone who believed himself untouchable. Veronica continued moving with the same rigid confidence, unaware that every gesture now felt like part of a larger story unfolding beyond her control. Mia Turner approached once more, though this time she did not bring snacks or water. Her expression looked heavier, as though she carried news she did not want to hold alone. She stopped at Malcolm's row, hands clasped tightly behind her back to hide their tremble. "Sir," she murmured, "I heard something you need to know." Malcolm met her eyes with calm patience. "Go on." She swallowed and leaned closer, her voice barely above a breath. "Veronica told Captain Lewis that you are causing tension in the cabin. She said passengers feel uneasy because of you. She is preparing to label your behavior as potential disruption." Malcolm felt his pulse steady, not quicken. "Did you hear this directly?" Mia nodded, her jaw tight. "I heard it with my own ears." The air around Malcolm thickened. Not with anger, with clarity. The situation had crossed from simple discrimination to deliberate manipulation, woven carefully by those who expected their authority to shield them. "Thank you," Malcolm said softly. Mia stepped back, her eyes shiny with frustration. "I wish I could do more," she whispered. "You are doing more than you know," Malcolm replied. Her breathing eased, and she walked on, carrying the quiet courage she had shown throughout the flight. After she left, Malcolm looked out the window again. The sky had deepened into a rich dark, the earth below barely visible. Far off in the distance, soft pinpricks of city lights shimmered like tiny clusters of truth waiting to be discovered. He thought of his mother. She had worked painful hours in a hospital that never paid her what she deserved. Yet she greeted each patient with the grace of someone who believed dignity was a responsibility, not a reward. She taught him that silence could be powerful if used wisely, but dangerous if used out of fear. He thought of his father, a man who valued integrity above all else, a man who taught him how to breathe through humiliation without letting bitterness shape him. A man who believed that strength was revealed only in moments when no one expected you to stand tall. Malcolm closed his eyes for a moment. He carried them both tonight, their lessons, their resilience, their refusal to surrender identity for acceptance. The meditation was interrupted by the slight shift of someone settling behind him. The mediation specialist leaned forward again, voice low. "When people try to shift blame before conflict emerges," he said, "they are preparing to protect themselves. It means they know they acted improperly." Malcolm nodded. Fear makes people rewrite the truth before the truth can speak. The man offered a small, knowing smile. "You have handled yourself with more grace than many would have." Malcolm looked ahead again. "Grace is strength," he said quietly, "but strength must be paired with action." The plane's intercom buzzed softly, and Captain Lewis spoke with a tone that sounded firm but laced with something new. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated. We will be beginning our descent soon." Malcolm could hear unease beneath the captain's composure. He wondered if someone had already shown him the circulating video, or if the captain had sensed that tonight would not be forgotten easily. People like him rarely feared consequences, but the presence of evidence changed everything. The cabin lights flickered to a brighter tone. Passengers adjusted their seats. A few exchanged glances with Malcolm, their expressions carrying silent apologies for their earlier stillness. A young woman a few rows ahead turned and spoke softly but clearly. "I just wanted to say, thank you for staying calm. You handled something unfair with more dignity than they deserved." Malcolm gave her a gentle nod. "It was never about deserving," he replied. "It was about choosing who I am." She smiled softly, as though his words offered something she needed to hear. As the plane began its quiet descent, the atmosphere shifted again, not with fear, not with chaos, with expectation. Mia Turner passed by one last time. Her eyes met Malcolm's briefly. "Good luck when you land," she said under her breath. "We will be watching." Her words were not a warning. They were a promise. The descent continued. The lights of the city below grew larger, forming a glowing map of streets and stories waiting for their next chapter. Malcolm straightened his posture, folded his hands once more, and breathed deeply. He had not asked for this moment, but he would not run from it. He would not let lies shape the truth. He would not allow silence to protect injustice. He would not leave the cabin as the man they tried to define him as. He would leave as the man he chose to be. The wheels touched the runway with a soft thud, pulling the cabin slightly forward. Passengers inhaled sharply, some out of habit, others out of anticipation. Something significant had begun during this flight, and it would not end here. The aircraft rolled to a gradual stop near the terminal, its lights reflecting softly against the windows. Passengers shifted in their seats, gathering belongings with a mix of relief and restlessness. Yet in the center of that normal rhythm, Malcolm Reeves remained still, as if he were listening to something no one else could hear. The engines powered down. The overhead vents released a faint sigh of cooled air. For a moment, the cabin felt suspended, caught between what had happened above the clouds and what waited on the ground. Malcolm slowly rose from his seat. Movements around him paused. Some passengers stepped aside to give him room, not out of fear, but out of quiet respect for the dignity he had carried through turbulence that had nothing to do with the sky. He thanked those who made space with a gentle nod and stepped into the aisle. Something in the air shifted, subtle but undeniable. People watched, some with shame for their earlier silence, some with admiration for the calm strength he had displayed, and some with a curious awareness that they were witnessing the start of something larger than a seating dispute. As Malcolm stepped forward, Mia Turner appeared near the front of the cabin. Her posture was rigid, but her eyes spoke with sincerity as she whispered, "Whatever happens next, you are not alone in this." Malcolm gave her a gentle, reassuring smile. "Truth rarely walks alone," he said softly. She pressed her lips together, trying to steady the emotions gathering in her throat, then stepped aside so he could pass. Passengers parted down the aisle. Each step Malcolm took was deliberate, steady, grounded. He reached the curtain separating first class. Veronica Hayes was on the other side, her face controlled yet tightened with the uneasy awareness that she had lost control of the narrative. Bradley Mason sat rigidly in his seat, attempting to project confidence, though the tension in his jaw betrayed him. Veronica met Malcolm's eyes for the first time without the shield of authority. "Sir," she said quietly, her voice struggling for steadiness, "please allow the first-class cabin to deplane first." Malcolm looked at her without anger. This cabin lost its place to speak of priority the moment truth was dismissed. Her throat tightened. Bradley shifted uncomfortably, his bravado draining into silence. Captain Lewis stepped out of the cockpit, posture stiff, trying to retrieve authority he no longer commanded. "Mr. Reeves," he said carefully, "I must ask that you allow proper procedures as passengers exit. For safety." Malcolm's gaze held steady, calm yet unwavering. "I intend to follow safety, but I will not bow to a rule used only when it benefits you." Lewis inhaled sharply, ready to argue, but something in Malcolm's tone stopped him. There was no threat, only clarity. Passengers from economy began stepping forward, passing through first class. Some offered Malcolm soft acknowledgments as they walked by, quiet gestures of solidarity. A middle-aged woman paused near him. "You taught all of us something tonight," she whispered. Malcolm offered her a gentle nod. Moments like this were not about applause. They were about truth rising where silence had lived too long. As the cabin emptied, a tension settled between Malcolm and the crew. Veronica's lips tightened. Bradley avoided eye contact entirely. Captain Lewis shifted his weight, uncertain whether to stand firm or step aside. Eventually, only Malcolm remained. He stepped off the aircraft and onto the jet bridge. The air felt cooler, carrying the faint smell of metal and disinfectant. The hallway curved gently, leading toward the terminal where bright lights glowed in the distance. Halfway through the bridge, footsteps approached from behind. Malcolm stopped. Captain Lewis appeared, his expression conflicted. The man's voice dropped lower, no longer carrying the practiced authority of flight announcements. "You should know," he said. "The company will move quickly. They never ignore situations like this, but they will try to protect themselves first." Malcolm's gaze was steady. Truth does not bend for convenience. Lewis looked away, jaw tense. "Veronica said she will file a report stating you raised your voice and disrupted passenger order. She's already preparing it. If it is recorded first, it will shape the entire investigation." Malcolm's eyes softened, oddly compassionate. "And what will you say?" Lewis hesitated, caught between fear and conscience. I don't know." Malcolm nodded slowly. "Then ask yourself what kind of leader you want to be when the truth looks you in the face." The words landed with gentle force. Lewis lowered his gaze and stepped back without another word. Malcolm continued forward. The glass doors of the terminal opened, releasing a warm, faintly buzzing atmosphere filled with travelers, rolling luggage, scattered conversations, and flashing digital signs. He stepped inside, unnoticed at first, but not for long. A young man near a charging station gasped softly and lifted his phone. "Is that him?" "That's the CEO from the video." Within seconds, whispers spread like ripples across water. People glanced up from their screens, some with sympathy, others with curiosity, others with anger at what they had seen online. A woman approached cautiously. "Excuse me, are you Dr. Malcolm Reeves?" He nodded. She exhaled, her face softening. "Thank you for handling that with dignity. The world needed to see someone respond with strength without violence." Malcolm gave her a warm, steady look. "Dignity is not optional. It is a responsibility we owe ourselves." She smiled gently and stepped away. More passengers gathered nearby. Some offered support. Some asked if he needed assistance. Others simply watched with quiet reflection. Among the cluster, Aaron Miles appeared again, his camera hanging at his side. He approached Malcolm with a sincerity that carried no agenda. "I just want to say," he began, "what you did up there, it mattered. Not just for you, for people who never get heard." Malcolm placed a hand on the man's shoulder, steady and grateful. "You helped by speaking when it counted." Aaron shook his head softly. "Anyone should have." Malcolm's voice remained warm, though touched by truth. "Not many do. That is why your voice carried weight tonight." Aaron's expression tightened with emotion. "If you ever need a witness or a statement, you have one." Malcolm nodded appreciatively. "Thank you." He stepped past the gathering crowd. The terminal stretched ahead, gleaming under bright lights. The hum of rolling luggage filled the air like a steady rhythm guiding him forward. His phone buzzed. A message from his chief of staff. "Lydia Hart, Malcolm. News outlets are already asking for statements. Call me as soon as you reach the car. We're ready." He slipped the phone back into his pocket and continued walking. Each step felt anchored by resolve. The events of the flight had revealed something deeper than a conflict between passengers. They had revealed a wound that ran through the culture of the airline, a wound inflicted not by accident, but by habit. But wounds could heal, if treated. And sometimes healing required exposure, required truth, required steady hands willing to lift the weight others ignored. At the exit of the terminal, the automatic doors parted. A faint breeze touched his face, as though greeting him into the next chapter. He did not turn back. The story was moving forward, and he intended to meet it with the full measure of who he was. The car sent by his company waited just outside the terminal. Its dark exterior reflected the shifting lights from passing vehicles, each reflection sliding across the metal like a whisper of the night's intensity. When Malcolm Reeves stepped into the back seat, the quiet inside felt almost sacred, a needed pause after the tension in the cabin. The driver, an older gentleman named Clarence, who had worked with Malcolm for years, adjusted the mirror and offered a steady, respectful nod. "I saw the news alerts, sir. I hope you're all right." Malcolm's voice came low, measured. "I'm steady." "Clarence." "Thank you." Clarence nodded again, understanding that steadiness did not mean ease, only resolve. Once the vehicle joined the slow line of traffic leaving the airport, Malcolm pulled out his phone and dialed his chief of staff, Lydia Hart. Her voice answered instantly, sharp but warm. "Malcolm, are you safe?" "Safe enough," he replied, "though safety isn't the question tonight." Lydia exhaled, the sound crisp through the line. "The video is everywhere. News outlets picked it up within an hour. People are furious. Some are calling for an immediate investigation. Others are tagging your name, asking for a statement." Malcolm looked out the window. The city stretched outward, glowing with the steady hum of millions of lives moving at once. He watched the reflections dance across the glass. "No statements yet," he said quietly. "Not until truth is arranged properly." "Understood. But the airline has already released a short message. They called it a passenger disturbance incident." Malcolm's jaw tightened, though his voice remained calm. "They are preparing a narrative before facing responsibility." "Exactly," Lydia said. "Our communications team is ready on your signal." "Not yet," he repeated. Lydia paused, her intuition sharp. "You need more information." Malcolm nodded to himself. "I need the truth placed where no one can bury it. We'll be ready. Just tell me what you learn." He ended the call gently. The city lights slid across his face, revealing reflection rather than anger. He leaned back, letting the rhythm of the road settle him. A part of him replayed the flight Veronica's cold dismissal, Bradley's arrogance, the captain's resistance, Mia's quiet courage. Each detail formed its own thread, and together they wove a tapestry of something systemic. But this wasn't about reward or retaliation. It was about realignment, recalibration, repairing damage that had gone unchecked for far too long. Clarence glanced into the mirror. "You look thoughtful tonight." Malcolm offered a faint smile. "Thoughtful is often the beginning of clarity." Clarence nodded. "When they step on your dignity, sir, that's when a man shows who he really is." Malcolm appreciated the wisdom behind those words. Clarence had lived long enough to know that strength didn't always come from power. Sometimes it came from surviving experiences that tested one's identity. Traffic slowed ahead, and the car eased into a quiet lane. Malcolm's phone buzzed with a new message. It was from Mia Turner. "Sir, I don't know who else to trust. Something happened after you left. Call me if you can." Malcolm read the words twice, feeling the weight behind them. He dialed her number immediately. She answered on the first ring, voice trembling. "Thank you for calling back. I didn't know if I should reach out." "You did the right thing," Malcolm said gently. "Tell me what happened." Mia breathed shakily. "After you left, Captain Lewis called a meeting in the galley. Only the senior crew. He told them to prepare aligned statements. He said the company would back them if they all kept the same version. What version? That you were confrontational, that you raised your voice, that you made other passengers uncomfortable. Her voice trembled. I heard Veronica telling the others to say they feared escalation. They want to make you look dangerous. A soft silence filled the line. Malcolm closed his eyes briefly. Thank you, Mia, he said with warmth. You've carried truth where it was needed most. She swallowed hard. I did it because you didn't lash out. You didn't shout. You didn't threaten anyone. You showed us what dignity looks like. I couldn't let them bury that. Her words were thick with emotion she had held for too long. You are not alone in this, Malcolm told her softly. Not anymore. Mia inhaled shakily. Be careful, sir. They are afraid, and people who are afraid can be unpredictable. Malcolm nodded even though she couldn't see. Fear cannot hide forever. Truth catches up. When he ended the call, Clarence glanced at him again. Is everything all right, sir? Not all right, Malcolm said, but clearer. Clarence hummed thoughtfully. Sometimes clarity is the first step before change. The car continued forward, passing through a quieter part of the city. Tall buildings framed the skyline, their windows glowing with stories of people ending their day, unaware of the storm gathering just beneath the surface. Malcolm's phone buzzed again. This time it was Aaron Miles. Hey, Malcolm. I hope it's okay I saved your number earlier. Something important came up. Go ahead, Malcolm said. There's a second angle of the video circulating. It shows everything from the start. The moment Veronica walked to your seat, the way she spoke, the way Bradley smirked, and how you never raised your voice. Malcolm felt a slow steadiness spread through him. Aaron continued, People are calling it one of the clearest examples of discrimination caught on camera. Hashtags with your name are everywhere. Reporters reached out to me too. I haven't said anything. I figured it wasn't my place yet. You did the right thing, Malcolm said. Aaron exhaled, relieved. I just wanted you to know. The truth isn't hiding. Not this time. They ended the call. For a long stretch of road, Malcolm remained quiet. His thoughts flowed gently, settling into a place of clarity he had needed. Everything was aligning, not through force, but through integrity. The car turned onto a narrower street, lined with tall trees. Their branches swayed lightly in the night breeze, casting soft shadows across the pavement. Malcolm watched them pass, grateful for the quiet they offered. He thought of every person who had stood silently on that flight. Some had been afraid to speak, some unsure how, some frozen in the moment. And yet several had chosen voice over silence when it mattered. Their courage, though small in action, carried immense weight. It reminded him of something his father once said. A single candle doesn't erase darkness, but it tells darkness it cannot stay forever. Malcolm breathed deeply, feeling that truth settle into his bones. Tonight was not the end of a conflict. It was the beginning of a revelation. He looked ahead with calm resolve. No anger, no desire for retribution, only the intention to lift what had been hidden into a place where it could no longer harm in silence. The car slowed as it approached his building. The entrance lights cast a warm glow across the sidewalk. Malcolm gathered his things with deliberate grace. Clarence turned to him as he stepped out. Sir, whatever comes next, remember this. You didn't just hold your dignity. You held theirs too, even when they threw it away. Malcolm placed a hand briefly on the roof of the car, grounding himself. Thank you, Clarence. That means more than you know. He straightened his posture and walked toward the entrance. His steps carried both calm and certainty. Behind him, the city hummed with quiet anticipation. Ahead of him, truth waited to be spoken fully. The lobby of Malcolm Reeves' building welcomed him with a quiet warmth. Soft light glowed along the high ceiling, and the gentle hum of the air vents filled the space with a calm rhythm. It contrasted sharply with the tension he carried from the flight, yet he did not rush to shed that tension. It had purpose now. As he stepped through the glass doors, the night attendant, a kind woman named Marlene, who had known him for years, straightened in her chair. Her eyes widened the moment she saw him. "Dr. Reeves, I just saw the footage, the whole plane, everything they did." Her voice trembled with disbelief. "Are you all right?" Malcolm offered her a small, steady smile. "I'm steady, Marlene, and I'm home. That helps." She exhaled as though releasing something she had been holding for too long. "I knew you'd handle it with grace," she murmured, "but they had no right." Malcolm touched her hand gently on the counter. "Thank you for your kindness. It matters." He walked toward the elevator. Marlene watched him go, her expression a blend of admiration and protective worry. When the elevator doors closed, Malcolm leaned back slightly, letting the soft whirring carry him upward. His reflection stared back from the metal wall. Calm eyes, tired eyes, focused eyes. The doors opened on the 20th floor. His apartment greeted him with stillness. Large windows overlooked the city, revealing a vast landscape of lights stretching deep into the distance. He dropped his bag onto the table and loosened his tie, the fabric slipping away like a weight being set aside. Before he could take another breath, his phone rang. Lydia Hart's voice carried urgency, though she kept it under control. "Malcolm, CNN is requesting a live interview at 8 in the morning. The New York Post is running a headline already. Twitter and Facebook are overwhelmed with support. It's accelerating. Fast." He walked toward the window, gazing at the glowing skyline. "Has the airline released a full statement, yet only a vague message?" Lydia replied. "They claim they are reviewing the matter and gathering reports. Nothing specific. They're trying to buy time." Malcolm nodded slowly. Time can serve truth, or it can serve fear. Lydia understood the meaning behind his words. "Should we draft your message tonight?" "Not yet," Malcolm said softly. "I have calls to make first, and there are voices that must be included. I won't speak alone." Lydia paused, sensing something deeper in his tone. "What do you need from me? Contact the legal team. Ask them to gather every passenger who is willing to provide testimony. I want their voices documented. Their perspective matters. Consider it done." He ended the call and let the silence settle again. A few moments passed before he dialed another number. It rang several times before a soft voice answered. "Hello? This is Mia." Malcolm smiled gently. "It's Malcolm. I wanted to make sure you made it home safely." Mia let out a shaky breath. "I did, though it felt like the longest ride of my life." "You were brave today," Malcolm said. "Bravery grows in quiet ways, and you carried it when it mattered." Mia paused, overwhelmed. "I was terrified," she admitted. "But when I saw how calm you were, something in me changed. You didn't let them reduce you. I learned from that." He let her words sink in, grateful not for the praise, but for the awakening behind it. "Your truth has weight," Malcolm said. "Tomorrow, people will need to hear it, but only if you feel ready." "I want to speak," she said firmly. "They can't keep hurting people and hiding it." "Good, but rest tonight. The world can wait until tomorrow." When the call ended, Malcolm placed the phone on the table and let the quiet return. His apartment was peaceful, filled with soft shadows and warm light. Yet tonight, that stillness felt like a gathering place for the voices he carried from the plane. He walked to the kitchen and poured a glass of water. The coldness steadied him. His thoughts drifted back to his father. A memory rose, clear and vivid. His father once stood outside their small home, facing a neighbor who had spoken to him with disrespect. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't respond with anger. He simply said, "A man doesn't lose himself when insulted. He loses himself when he believes the insult defines him." Those words had shaped Malcolm far more than any business lesson. He carried them tonight. His phone buzzed again. This time it was a message from Aaron Miles. "Malcolm, 3 other passengers want to support your case. They saw everything. Want me to connect them with you?" Malcolm typed back, "Yes. Please send their numbers." Then another message appeared from an unknown number. "Sir, this is Daniel Brooks. I'm the man who sat behind you. I work in conflict mediation. I want you to know that your restraint tonight was extraordinary. You taught us how dignity moves. If you need my statement, I'm here." Malcolm felt a quiet warmth rise in his chest. Daniel had seen everything with the trained eyes of someone who understood human behavior. His testimony would carry weight. Malcolm replied, "Thank you, Daniel. Your voice will help balance the truth." He set the phone down once more. Just as he did, the screen lit up again, displaying a contact he rarely used, his mother. He answered immediately. "Malcolm, baby, are you safe?" Her voice carried a tremor, layered with worry and strength. "I'm safe. Mom, I saw the video. My heart broke. But I want you to hear me," she said firmly. "You didn't do anything wrong. You held yourself like I raised you to. I'm proud of you." Malcolm closed his eyes. Her voice had always been a shelter. "This isn't about me anymore," he said quietly. "I know. It's about everyone who doesn't get heard." He breathed deeply, her words forming an anchor. "Rest. Mom, I'll talk to you tomorrow." He ended the call, letting its warmth linger. As he walked toward the window again, the city lights stretched endlessly, shimmering like countless stories woven together. He placed a hand gently against the cold glass, grounding himself. The world was watching, but he felt no fear. He felt purpose, steady, clear, centered. He wasn't preparing for war. He was preparing for truth. And truth did not shout. Truth walked forward, step by steady step, until silence broke on its own. A gentle silence filled the conference room on the 32nd floor of Reeves Dynamics headquarters. Glass walls revealed the sprawling city below, shimmering with countless points of light. The room itself held an unspoken gravity, as if it already sensed what was about to unfold. Malcolm Reeves arrived with the calm presence of a man who had walked through storms before. His steps were measured, steady, grounded in something deeper than confidence. Lydia Hart stood ready near the head of the table, sleeves rolled up, laptop open, eyes sharp yet supportive. She greeted him with a nod. "Everyone is on their way up. Legal, communications, the witnesses you approved. I also arranged for privacy. No media, no leaks." Malcolm appreciated her precision. "Thank you, Lydia. Ma, today must be anchored in truth, not spectacle." She smiled, relieved to see the clarity in his expression. "You look centered, more than last night." Malcolm turned toward the window. The reflections along the glass reminded him of the many lives touched by what had occurred. "Early grows when silence breaks," he said quietly. The elevator chimed. One by one, people entered the room. Aaron Miles stepped in first, holding a folder of printed screenshots and timestamps from the videos he collected. His face was calm, but his posture showed a sense of responsibility. Behind him came Daniel Brooks, the mediation specialist from the flight. He carried a notebook and offered Malcolm a gentle nod of solidarity. A moment later, Mia Turner walked through the door. Her uniform was gone, replaced by simple clothes and a thin jacket. She paused at the entrance, eyes searching the room until they landed on Malcolm. When she saw him standing tall, steady, she exhaled with relief. "I didn't sleep much," she admitted softly. "Neither did I," Malcolm said, but with a warmth that eased her tension. "Yet we're here. That's enough." She gave a small, grateful smile. The last to arrive was Sophia Grant, the head of the legal team. She placed several binders on the table, each labeled meticulously. Once everyone settled, Lydia dimmed the light slightly and began projecting the collected evidence onto the main screen. Malcolm took a moment before speaking, allowing the atmosphere to settle, to draw breath. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his tone low, gentle, yet carrying the weight of purpose. What happened on that flight was not one person's wound. It was a wound shaped by culture, protected by silence, and repeated through habit. Today, we begin the process of lifting that weight. He looked around the room, meeting each pair of eyes with sincerity. But this will not be a fight built on anger. It will be a movement built on clarity and truth. Aaron spoke first, sliding copies of screenshots toward Lydia. This angle shows everything clearly. From the moment Veronica approached Dr. Reeves, her tone was different. And Bradley Mason's comments. They were recorded by at least 5 passengers. The timestamps aligned perfectly, Daniel added calmly. I observed the interaction from less than 2 feet behind. At no point did Dr. Reeves raise his voice. His posture, tone, and body language remained non-threatening. The escalation came exclusively from the crew. Sophia began flipping through her binder. We have witness statements from 6 passengers so far, each consistent. We also have the circulated video, the secondary angle, and testimony from Mia regarding the internal behavior of the crew. Based on this, we can move forward in 2 directions: legal intervention and corporate accountability from the airline. Mia's hands trembled slightly as she clasped them in her lap. When they told us to write aligned statements, she began, her voice shaking. I felt sick. They said the company would protect us if our reports matched, but they wanted us to lie. They wanted to blame him. Her eyes lowered, and they wanted to protect themselves. Sophia leaned forward. Your testimony is crucial, Ms. Turner. It reveals intent. Without it, the airline could claim confusion or miscommunication. With your truth, the pattern becomes undeniable. Mia swallowed, gathering strength. I'm ready, whatever it costs. Malcolm's voice came soft but firm. You won't carry that cost alone. A quiet certainty passed between them. Lydia stood near the end of the table. We also need to address the public narrative. The airline is preparing a structured statement. They're hoping to frame Malcolm's reaction as emotional, unstable, or confrontational. That is their shield. Aaron shook his head. People already saw the video. They know the truth. Sophia responded gently. Truth doesn't always win by being visible. It wins by being organized, documented, presented clearly. Daniel nodded thoughtfully. Public opinion can shift quickly if the airline twists the story first. People forget their outrage when confusion enters. We must prevent confusion. Malcolm stepped closer to the head of the table. His eyes carried a depth that drew everyone's focus. This moment is bigger than a seat, bigger than a single flight. It is about every person who has been asked to shrink themselves for someone else's comfort. Every person told to accept injustice quietly. Every person who walked away feeling their dignity had been measured by someone else's eyes. Everyone listened in complete stillness. We will not shout. Malcolm continued. We will not break what needs rebuilding. We will bring truth into a place where denial has no room left to breathe. Sophia opened a folder and spoke with precision. I've drafted a request for an emergency hearing with the airline's parent company. As a major shareholder, you have the right to call for immediate review when reputational harm is demonstrated. With the evidence gathered, they cannot ignore the request. Lydia stepped beside her. If they try to avoid it, the media pressure alone will force their hand. Malcolm nodded. Prepare the documents. We present them today. Mia looked startled. Today, Sophia replied. The longer we wait, the more their narrative solidifies. Today is necessary. Malcolm turned to Mia, his tone gentle. Are you afraid? She hesitated. Yes, but not of the truth, only of what speaking it might cost. Malcolm gave a slow nod. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's choosing something higher than fear. Mia's eyes glistened, but her voice steadied. Then I choose truth. A quiet strength filled the room. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It was the kind of strength that grows when people refuse to step back from what matters. Lydia resumed. We'll finalize the statements, organize the evidence, and document every witness. After that, we notify the board, Sophia added, and if they try to silence the issue, we go public with everything we have. Malcolm looked at every face around the table. Then let's begin. For a moment, all that could be heard was the soft clicking of keys, the shuffling of papers, the deep breaths of people preparing for something that would change far more than a corporate policy. It would change a culture. And it began here, in a quiet room filled with ordinary voices choosing to tell an extraordinary truth. The marble hallway outside the Summit Air Group boardroom stretched in a long, quiet line. Its polished floor reflected the warm lights overhead, creating the feeling of walking across a calm river at night. Yet beneath that calm, something powerful stirred, something that had waited too long to be confronted. Malcolm Reeves paused at the end of the hall. Lydia Hart stood to his right, carrying a folder of organized statements. Sophia Grant stood to his left, holding the legal documents prepared through the night. Behind them, Aaron Miles, Daniel Brooks, and Mia Turner followed with a quiet strength that seemed to fill the corridor. Mia's breath trembled as she stepped beside Malcolm. Do you think they'll listen? Malcolm turned to her with the same steady warmth he had carried through every moment since the flight. Truth always finds someone to hear it, even if it has to push through walls. She nodded, clutching her small notebook to her chest, as if holding on to courage itself. A security guard opened the large wooden door, and the group stepped inside. The boardroom was vast, with a long rectangular table at the center. Tall windows framed the skyline, and each seat around the table was occupied by a member of the executive leadership. Some looked restless, others unreadable. A few wore expressions that tried to appear neutral but failed to hide their discomfort. At the center sat Franklin Ward, the chairman of Summit Air Group. His silver hair was combed neatly, his suit flawless, yet his eyes showed the fatigue of someone struggling to manage a crisis before fully understanding it. He rose slowly when Malcolm entered. "Dr. Reeves, thank you for coming on such short notice. Please, have a seat." Malcolm didn't sit. Neither did anyone behind him. The silence that followed carried weight. Franklin cleared his throat and gestured awkwardly. "If you prefer to stand, that's fine. We have reviewed a portion of the situation, but would like to hear your perspective directly." Sophia stepped forward first, placing a stack of documents on the table. Her voice was calm, precise. These files include 6 passenger statements, 2 video recordings from independent sources, a log of internal communication from the crew during the flight, and the airline's misconduct record for the individuals involved, which we have reason to believe has been suppressed over the past 2 years. A wave of whispers moved through the board members. Franklin raised a hand. "Let us proceed in order. Dr. Reeves, please describe what took place." Malcolm stepped forward, the quiet room drawing in closer. He spoke without raising his voice, but every syllable carried clarity. "I was reassigned from a first-class seat I purchased, not because of a system error, but because a crew member decided I didn't belong there. That choice was supported by another crew member, and protected by a culture that has done this before." He let the words settle, not rushed, not dramatic. This was not an isolated mistake. It was a practiced pattern. One of the board members, a stern-faced man with a rigid posture, leaned forward. "Dr. Reeves, we have procedures for resolving customer incidents. Many situations are misunderstood or exaggerated. Are you suggesting malicious intent?" Sophia responded briskly. "Yes, and we have proof." Lydia passed around printed screenshots the group chat where the crew joked about protecting the image of first class. The board members stiffened visibly. A few lowered their heads, unwilling to meet the truth on the page. Then came the recorded audio. Voices echoed through the room. "Keep the white section clean today. Some passengers need to be reminded of their place." The room fell into a stunned stillness. Mia stepped forward then, her voice trembling but resolute. "I worked with them. I heard these things before. They trained us to think it was normal. When someone complained, their file was buried. I tried to stay quiet because I didn't want to lose my job. But after what they did to him, I couldn't stay silent anymore." Her voice broke. Malcolm placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, steadying her. Franklin looked shaken. "Miss Turner, are you prepared to swear this testimony under oath?" "Yes," she whispered. "I've never been more certain of anything." Another board member asked quietly. Why now? Mia turned toward Malcolm, her eyes filled with truth. Because he didn't react with anger. He reacted with dignity. It made me realize how wrong everything was, and how much damage silence causes. A soft ripple of emotion moved through the table. Daniel Brooks spoke next, offering his perspective with calm professionalism. "I specialize in conflict mediation. I observed the interaction directly." Dr. Reeves remained completely composed. The crew escalated every stage. This was discrimination shaped into procedure. Aaron opened the folder he held. I captured the footage from 2 angles. The public has already seen the first. The second angle is clearer. The airline cannot deny what happened. If anything, the public narrative will grow stronger the longer the company hesitates. Franklin massaged his temples, then looked around the room. "We are looking at a crisis, a major one." Malcolm finally spoke again, his voice deep, steady. "Crisis is what grows when truth is ignored." Franklin met his gaze. "What do you want, Dr. Reeves? What outcome are you seeking?" Malcolm let the question linger before answering. "I don't want apology for myself. Dignity cannot be repaid with words. I want structural change, cultural reform, Accountability that protects every future passenger and every employee who fears speaking. He stepped closer to the table. Not intimidating, simply present. I want the crew responsible removed from their positions immediately. I want the leadership who enabled them investigated. And I want a system in place that ensures this cannot continue in silence. Franklin looked to the board. And if we refuse, Malcolm did not raise his voice, then the truth will walk where you refuse to let it stand, and the world will decide what your silence means. The air tightened. Sophia placed another document before Franklin. Dr. Reeves, as a major shareholder, has already filed for an emergency internal ethics hearing. The law is clear. You must comply. The board exchanged looks. Fear, realization, and something else, shame. Finally, Franklin inhaled deeply. We vote immediately, one by one. Hands rose. Approval for investigation. Approval for crew termination. Approval for full reform. Unanimous. When the final hand lifted, the weight in the room shifted. Something long protected had finally cracked open. Franklin turned to Malcolm. Dr. Reeves, the decisions are passed. The crew involved will be terminated today. The internal investigation begins within the hour, and the public announcement will confirm full accountability. Malcolm nodded once, solemnly. Thank you. Now the healing can begin. No celebration, no triumph, only truth. As the group turned to leave, Mia whispered to Malcolm, "You changed everything today." He shook his head gently. "We did this together. Truth is never carried by one person alone." The press courtyard outside Summit Air Group headquarters had transformed into a sea of microphones, camera lights, and restless murmurs. Reporters stood shoulder to shoulder behind metal barricades. Photographers adjusted their focus again and again, waiting for the door that would soon open. Even the air felt charged, as if holding its breath. Inside the building, Malcolm Reeves walked down a long corridor toward those waiting lights. Lydia Hart stayed close beside him, smoothing the last page of the prepared statement, even though she had memorized every word. Sophia Grant followed a step behind, composed and sharp, ready to handle the legal questions that would inevitably erupt. Mia Turner walked with her hands linked in front of her. Her steps were quiet, yet steady. The closer they got to the exit, the more she seemed to draw strength from something within her, or perhaps from the truth she no longer carried alone. Aaron Miles and Daniel Brooks moved behind the group, both solemn, both purposeful. They knew the world would remember what happened today, and they wanted to stand in the light with Malcolm when it did. As they neared the final door, Lydia placed a hand gently on Malcolm's arm. "Are you ready?" He looked at her with calm certainty. Truth doesn't require readiness, only honesty. She nodded softly, understanding. The security guard pushed open the door. A wall of voices surged forward. "Dr. Reeves, do you intend to sue, Dr. Reeves? Were you targeted because of your race? Dr. Reeves, what do you want from Summit Air, Dr. Reeves? What message do you have for the country?" The barrage came fast, overlapping, intense. The light of dozens of cameras illuminated Malcolm in a bright wash, but his posture remained grounded, steady, unwavering. Lydia stepped forward first. "Ladies and gentlemen, please allow Dr. Reeves to speak. You will have time for questions after the statement." The crowd settled reluctantly, microphones rising in tense anticipation. Malcolm approached the podium. For a heartbeat, he simply looked at the faces before him, some curious, some outraged, some hopeful, some skeptical. Many tired of a world that kept repeating the same wounds. He inhaled gently and began, "Yesterday, I boarded Summit Air Flight 227 with a ticket I purchased like any other passenger. I expected a journey. What I received was a lesson one taught not through confrontation, but through quiet prejudice. A seat was taken from me, but the truth is, many others have lost far more than a seat. The courtyard fell silent, hanging on every syllable. This was not a mistake. It was not a system glitch. It was a pattern one built from habits that went unchallenged and from voices that were silenced to protect comfort over dignity. He paused, his gaze shifting slowly across the crowd. But dignity is not a luxury. It is a right, not earned, not purchased, not negotiated. Mia felt her breath catch. Daniel stood taller. Aaron's grip tightened on his camera. Malcolm continued. When I refused to remain silent, I was not fighting for myself. I was fighting for every person asked to shrink themselves so someone else could remain unchallenged. For every employee trained to keep quiet. For every traveler who wondered whether respect was conditional. Camera shutters clicked rapidly. Today, Summit Air Group's board has voted unanimously to remove the crew responsible, launch a full ethics investigation, and implement structural reforms. This is not a victory for me. This is a beginning for all of us. He stepped away from the podium for a moment and gestured toward Mia Turner. Courage has many faces. Sometimes it is loud. Sometimes it is quiet. Sometimes it trembles. But courage still stands. Mia lowered her head, overwhelmed, tears forming at the corners of her eyes. Malcolm returned to the microphone. I am establishing the Reeves Initiative for Dignity in Travel, a foundation dedicated to protecting passengers, supporting whistleblowers, and ensuring that no one is silenced for speaking the truth. This is not revenge. This is responsibility. A slow ripple of applause rose from the back of the crowd before spreading everywhere. One reporter raised her hand. Dr. Reeves, what do you hope the country learns from this? Malcolm looked at her with gentle seriousness. That justice does not begin in courtrooms. It begins in the small choices we make to see one another fully. It begins when we decide that silence is no longer acceptable. Another reporter shouted, Are you angry? Dr. Reeves. He offered a soft, reflective smile. Anger burns fast, but dignity endures. I choose what endures. The applause strengthened. After the questions concluded, the group stepped away from the podium toward a quieter area near the building. The courtyard still buzzed with voices repeating his words, spreading them like sparks catching on dry ground. Mia approached him, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. You didn't have to call me forward. I'm no one important. Malcolm turned to her, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. You are someone who chose truth over fear. That is importance. That is leadership. Her breath trembled again, though this time with hope. Daniel Brooks stepped in as well. You changed the entire tone of this moment. Malcolm, you turned conflict into clarity. That is rare. Aaron joined them, camera still hanging from his shoulder. The public already sees you as a symbol. People are saying you taught them how to stand without lifting your voice. Malcolm glanced at the crowd behind him, their faces filled with complex emotions. Symbols don't matter, he said softly. People do. Culture does. Change does. Lydia exhaled with a mix of relief and pride. We did something today that will echo for a long time. He nodded. And this is only the first chapter. The sky above them dimmed into deep blue, city lights glowing brighter against it. A quiet wind moved through the courtyard, rustling leaves along the pavement. It carried something gentle, something final, yet beginning. Mia looked up at Malcolm once more. What happens now? He smiled, Not triumphant, not weary. Just honest. Now, Mia, we rebuild. Not the airline, not the policy. We rebuild trust. She nodded, absorbing the words slowly, as if they were meant to be kept close. The group began walking together toward the car waiting at the curb. With every step, the noise behind them softened. A story that had begun in a narrow airplane cabin had now grown large enough to touch the entire city, and it would touch far more in the days to come. Before he entered the car, Malcolm paused and looked back one last time. He didn't see microphones. He didn't see headlines. He saw people wounded, awakening, learning, and in that moment, he felt something gentle settle in his chest. Not pride, not victory. Healing, a quiet promise taking shape. Justice had finally landed. But hope was taking flight. Malcolm Reeves's story is more than a story of a first-class ticket taken away. It's a reminder that in life, sometimes people are hurt not by the big blow, but by the small moments of disregard, moments that make us ask, what is my worth? The most valuable thing Malcolm showed us was not the strength to protest, but the calmness to face injustice without losing ourselves. He did not choose to retaliate with anger. He chose to use truth and dignity to make a system change. This lesson is for all of us, especially those who have gone through many ups and downs in times of being misjudged, being looked down upon, or being deprived of what we deserve. Remember that dignity is something no one can take away, unless we give it to them. And sometimes, just one person standing up, quietly but firmly, will start the change. We can't fix the world overnight, but we can change how we stand, how we speak, and how we refuse to be silent about wrongs. Thank you for taking the time to follow this emotional story. If Malcolm's journey makes you think or touches something in your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next stories. Your companionship is the motivation for us to continue bringing meaningful and healing content.